Hello there. Welcome to the Light Story Club. Settle in and find a comfy spot to relax. Before we get to the story, I would love to know your favorite myths and monsters. Comment where in the world you are and let's begin the story. I was born in the hollow, beneath a sky of stone and smoke, where the rivers run thick with magma and the air hums with quiet fury. My first memory is warmth, not the comfort of a hearth, but the press of ancient heat, heavy and slow, wrapping around me like a second skin. They called me Tamil. Not a name of love or softness, but a word with edges, carved from old tongues that spoke more in fire than breath. I was the smallest among my clutch, the runt of the ember nest, curled beside my siblings who snapped and hissed even in slumber. Their wings brushed mine like scythes in a windless field. We were taught early that love is not given, it is claimed. That survival was our first language, and pain, our second. Our mother, a creature of obsidian and shadow, did not cradle us. She taught us with silence and stares, her eyes like wells that saw far beyond what we could understand. When she spoke, her voice cracked the floor. "Only the worthy rise," she said once, her talons dragging sparks from the stone as she paced the nest. And worth is proven, not proclaimed. The hollow was vast and always shifting. Every path was lined with teeth, either literal or carved into the jagged edges of the tunnels. We learned to walk first, then to climb, and eventually to fly. My wings grew slower than the others. They laughed when I fell during my first leap from the perch, spiraling into a pit of smoldering ash. I remember the sting of grit in my eyes, the weight of shame in my bones. But I climbed out, always. I did not cry. Demons do not cry. We devour weakness, in ourselves and in each other. My first friend was a shadow, a creature that clung to the corners of our cavern. He had no name, only the sound he made, KTH. We didn't speak, not in words. We shared silence, the kind that stretches between two creatures who know the world won't spare them softness. I began to find strength in that silence, learned to move without sound, to see in the deep black where others stumbled. My siblings grew louder as they grew stronger. I grew quieter. One night, the elders came. The circle of thorns, our overseers. Tall and twisted, they glided on air that bent around their bodies. They wore masks, but it was said those were their true faces. Shaped by eons of cruelty and precision, they watched us, always watching. When the time came, they summoned us for the first trial. The trial was not a test of strength alone. That would be too simple. It was a test of memory, of loyalty, and of blood. We were sent into the ember maze, each with a single command: return with something only you can find. Some came back with the bones of lost demons. Some brought fire that burned in strange colors. I brought a heartbeat. Not mine, but the memory of one. Deep in the maze, I had found a relic, a stone that pulsed. Not warm, not hot. Alive. It did not beat like ours do, erratic and sharp. It beat slowly, with sadness, like a bell tolling underwater. I listened to it for hours, letting it echo in my chest. When I returned, I held it out and said, "This is what I lack." The elders did not speak. One of them tilted their mask, as if curious. I was allowed to pass. After the trial, we were no longer children. We were initiates, with names carved into obsidian and a place at the edge of the hollow's courts. My siblings grew proud. They tested their power, summoned fire from the air and split stone with their claws. I did not show what I could do. Not yet. There was something inside me that pulsed like the relic's heart. Something waiting. I began to dream not the wild flashes of fear or fire that demons often see, but calm images of a sky not made of rock. A blue sky, endless and empty. I didn't tell anyone. Dreams were dangerous. Dreams meant desire, and desire meant weakness if left unchecked. One night, I wandered past the bone pillars into the veiled grotto. Few dared enter. They said it was where the hollow touched the outer dark, where echoes had claws and the air whispered your regrets. I found something there, a mirror. Not of glass or silver, but obsidian smoothed by centuries. I saw myself, small, pale, with wings that still bore cracks. But behind me stood something larger, cloaked in shadow, with my eyes. It did not speak, but I knew it waited. That night I did not sleep. My friend, the shadow KTH, curled near me. We did not need words. He understood. We were not meant to belong yet. But one day we would. And so I grew, not just in size, but in silence. My thoughts deepened, darkened. I watched, I listened, I remembered. One day, the circle would call again. And when they did, I would not bring them something they expected. I would bring them a storm, not of fire or fury, but of understanding. For even in the deepest hollow, a demon could wander. And perhaps, one day, a demon could change. The hollow never slept. Even in its darkest hours, when the magma cooled and the shadows stretched long and lean like knives, there was motion beneath the stone. A constant breathing of something older than us, older than flame. The walls sometimes pulsed, faintly, like veins under skin. My kind ignored it. They had learned to see the world as a thing to conquer. But I listened. In the quiet, I could feel the truth, that the hollow was not merely our home. It was alive, and it watched us in return. My days became shaped by ritual. Each morning began with the ash chants, a low chorus meant to stir the sleeping heat in our bones. Then came the trials of form, tests of flight, strength, pain endurance, fire weaving. My wings, still marred from early failure, no longer failed me. They moved with a quiet grace, not showy but sure. My fire was not loud like my brother's, but precise. I could shape it into lines, into sigils, into things that held meaning. The instructors noticed. One of them, a narrow demon with ivory horns and eyes like sunken lanterns, pulled me aside after a session. He pressed a clawed hand to my chest, just over where the heart should be. "You shape," he murmured. "Not just fire. You shape thought." I did not know what to say. Praise among our kind was rare, dangerous even. He vanished into the smoke before I could reply. That night, I dreamt again of the blue sky. But this time, it was cracked. Lightning coiled across it like veins of silver, and in the center, a great eye opened. Not cruel, not kind, only watching. Always watching. I woke with a strange ache behind my ribs. The days grew hotter. The hollow shifted, as it always did with the changing of its unseen seasons. The molten rivers grew violent, lapping at their banks. Great stone slabs fell from the upper caverns, revealing deeper tunnels, older structures carved in languages no one spoke anymore. The elders called this the grating, when the world remembered its bones and tried to scratch away the skin of the present. It was a time for caution, but also a time of opportunity. My siblings, proud and restless, began to take risks. They dueled in the furnace arena, hoping to rise faster. Some won glory. Others disappeared, their names stricken from the obsidian records. I watched from the shadows. I was not ready to fight yet, not in the open. My war was slower, more patient. It was during one of my wanderings near the veiled grotto that I found the book. Not parchment, not stone slab, but a folded thing made of strange hide and ink. It smelled of dust and thunder. Inside were markings that shimmered faintly in the dark, runes unlike any I had ever seen. The first page bore a single line, one I could somehow understand: the fire that questions burns twice as long. I took it with me, hidden beneath my mantle. At night, when all others had gone to carve or rest or bleed, I studied it by the glow of a soft green flame I willed into being. The runes began to make sense, not through translation, but through something deeper. They felt like memory, like something I had once known but had forgotten. Diagrams of soul structures, echo patterns, shadow binding, all things never taught in our standard trials. I began to practice in secret. One evening, a voice found me. Not a whisper, not a thought. A voice, full and clear, without mouth or face. "Why do you hide?" it asked. I turned. Nothing. Only stone and smoke. "Because I must," I replied aloud. The voice did not return, but something about the hollow felt different after that. The echoes were slower, the darkness heavier. I told no one. Not even KTH, my quiet companion, who now stayed close only in dreams. I feared he had become more echo than being, fading into some layer of memory the hollow had claimed. Or perhaps, like the relic heart, he was never mine to begin with, only a fragment, a guide meant to vanish once his purpose was fulfilled. My instructors grew more distant. The circle of thorns was preparing something. We all felt it. An event, an ascension, a war. Demons spoke less and trained more. Gone were the jeers and rivalries, replaced by grim focus. Hunger. We were being forged. But into what? Then came the calling. A deep chime rang through the hollow, a sound not made of air or stone, but of pressure and will. One by one, we were summoned to the central chamber, where the great spire of bone split the cavern roof like a fang. There, the elders waited, their masks gleaming with newly etched marks, symbols of decision, of selection. Each initiate was judged, not just on their strength, but their potential to serve. The circle had plans, but not all were deemed worthy. Some were elevated, given names of honor, and cast into leadership. Others were reassigned, bound to servitude, to mines and guard posts and endless toil. My name was called last. I stepped forward, wings still imperfect, eyes steady. I offered no bow, no show of fear. I held the book beneath my mantle, its weight grounding me. The lead elder stepped down from the bone dais. His mask was different, darker, older, carved not with flame, but with silence. "You walk beside something," he said. "Something not of this hollow." I did not deny it. He tilted his head. "This is dangerous. And rare. I felt the relic heartbeat again, pulsing against my memory. "I know," I said. A long pause. Then he turned and raised his hand. "Tamil is chosen," the circle murmured, some in protest, others in strange awe. "Chosen for what?" I asked, but they gave no answer. Only a sigil, pressed into my chest, where my fire stirred. Not a mark of ownership. A key. The sigil they pressed into my chest never stopped pulsing. It wasn't pain, not exactly, but it was never still. A rhythmic push, like a second heart, deeper than the one that fed my body. When I closed my eyes, I could feel it drawing threads from the edges of my thoughts, weaving them into something unseen. It changed the way the hollow looked. Shadows bent differently when I passed. Runes that once looked like scratches now hummed with shapes. My fire flickered in unfamiliar colors when I let it burn untamed. I wasn't sure what the elders had marked me for, but I knew it had peeled me partly away from the world I had grown up in. The other initiates kept their distance. Some watched with envy, others with fear. None challenged me. Not because I was strongest, but because I was becoming other. And demons fear what they do not name. The instructors no longer gave me orders. Instead, they gave me tasks. To explore certain tunnels long sealed, to read texts that had been buried beneath screaming stone. I saw places no others were allowed to enter, caves with walls of glass that held trapped lightning, vaults where time moved slower and thoughts hung in the air like vapor. It was in one of those tunnels, the cradle spine, that I first heard the word echomancy. Etched along the ribs of a collapsed hallway were marks that shimmered when I spoke. Not loudly. Only when I whispered. I spent hours there, testing tones, syllables, even breaths. The runes responded. They didn't change, but they reacted. Soft pulses, vibrations in the bones underfoot. The more I whispered, the deeper they echoed back, until I felt my own voice returning not as sound, but shape. Memory. Echo. The sigil responded to this. I could feel it growing eager, almost feeding. It absorbed the resonance and left behind clarity. Things made more sense. Not in the way of answers, but in the absence of confusion. Like the difference between staring at a wall and knowing where a hidden door is even if it's not open. I had no words for it. Only instinct. In those days, my dreams began to twist. The blue sky returned, but it no longer cracked. Instead, it was ringed with flame, a perfect circle of fire, turning slowly. Within it, I saw a tower. Not of bone or stone, but of light made solid. Something waited at its peak. It was not demonic. But it was not human either. I woke every time just before I reached the stairs. My claws dug grooves into the stone beside my resting place. I no longer saw KTH. Even in dreams, the shadow was absent. I wondered if I had outgrown him or if I had stepped beyond where he could follow. I missed him, in my way. The hollow is a loud place, but inside, it is lonely. One cycle after the sigil's branding, the circle called for me again. This time, I was taken through a path I had never seen. Past the drowned crucible, where the fires no longer burn, into a chamber that seemed to exist beneath time. The air was still. The dust here didn't move. And yet I felt the pressure of thousands of eyes, all unseen, watching from just beyond the stone. The elders did not wait on a dais. They stood in a circle carved into the ground, around a pit that glowed faintly, not from fire, but from memory. It shimmered with scenes I could barely understand. A forest, a city, a face. "Tamil," the masked leader said, "do you know why you were marked? No, you were chosen for divergence, not loyalty." The words were not praise. They were a warning. They stepped aside, and the pit grew brighter. Images flashed: a burning sun, a crumbling tower, a mirror cracked at the center. "You will leave the hollow," he said. The words struck me harder than I expected. I had never imagined outside. Outside was myth, a place for angels and mortals and things that slept in still water. Not for us. "You will walk the rift paths," the elder continued, "where our world frays. You will find what the hollow fears. You will listen. And you will return." I wanted to speak, to ask why me, to question the purpose. But the sigil burned hot, and I understood. I was not a soldier. I was not even a demon in their eyes anymore. I was a tool sharpened against the unknown. They gave me a name I could not pronounce, not with breath, only with flame. It curled in my chest and made the air around me shimmer. Then they opened a gate. It was not a door, not even a rift. It was a wound, a split in the hollow's flesh, held open by chains of silence. Through it I saw not light, but possibility, a shifting path of colorless space. They pushed me through. The first thing I felt was cold. Not the cold of stone or dead ash, but absence. A world without fire. The rift was not a place, it was between places. Time hung in shreds. Sounds looped in on themselves. I walked, or floated, or fell. I cannot say. I only know that the sigil guided me, tugging my thoughts toward moments of stability. After what could have been hours or lifetimes, I found ground. Not hollow ground. A forest. Real, living green. Trees that breathed. Wind that moved without command. I was not welcome here. I felt it immediately. The world here did not hate me, but it remembered what I was. I stayed hidden. I did not burn. I did not fly. I watched from the shadows as small things moved: animals, humans, their thoughts quiet and soft. I saw pain, but not like ours. Love, but not like the old blood bonds of fire. I saw a mother cradle a child and sing, not to harden, but to soothe. I wept. Quietly, without tears. A soundless sorrow that the hollow would never name. This was why they sent me, not to learn of weakness, but to remember what we had lost. The forest did not welcome me, but it did not reject me either. That, I learned, was its nature. It simply existed. It did not ask why I came, or who I was. The trees moved with wind not born of command, and the leaves rustled like whispers with no meaning. I kept to the shadows, wrapping my wings close, willing my fire inward until even its smoke stilled. I was no longer in a world that responded to strength. I was in a world that responded to presence, to patience. And so I became still. The humans were fragile things, bones beneath thin flesh, voices carried by breath instead of heat. And yet, they endured. They built homes out of dead wood and stone, shaped food from roots and animals. Their lives were loud in a different way, not with fire or screams, but with laughter, mourning, the clatter of hands and tools and song. I had never heard song without purpose before. In the hollow, we chanted to bind power, to awaken flame, to summon silence. Here, they sang for joy. They sang to the sky, to one another, even to nothing. And I listened. Often. The sigil burned constantly in this place. Not with pain, but with hunger. It fed on newness, on unfamiliar emotion. It stretched in ways I did not expect. Sometimes I woke from trance dreams with new knowledge. Human words, names, emotions I had no word for in my old tongue. Guilt, tenderness, hope. It changed me, slowly, and I let it. I avoided their gaze for many cycles. I moved like wind, watching from treetops, caves, or behind the veil of fog. But one night, as frost began to cling to branches and the air turned brittle, I found myself caught. Not by force, by a child. He was alone, near a river that wound like silver through the forest. He had wandered from his village, chasing some glow, perhaps a foxfly or the pull of the stars. He fell, scraping his knee. He cried, not like demons do, but like something soft and open. It was not a cry for help. It was a release of helplessness. And something in me stirred. I stepped from the trees. He looked up, wide-eyed, too shocked to scream. I knelt beside him, slow and careful. My form was still wrong for this world. Horned, winged, glowing faintly at the edges. But his eyes saw me and did not look away. He didn't flinch. "You're hurt," I said, though I wasn't sure my voice would carry as theirs did. But he understood. He nodded. I reached out, letting a small flicker of heat rise through my palm, not fire, not enough to scorch, only warmth. I hovered it over his cut. The wound closed slowly, the skin knitting together beneath the heat. His breath caught. "Are you a god?" he whispered. I said nothing. What could I say? No, but also not yet. He leaned closer, squinting at my wings. "You're beautiful," he said, and I felt something break inside me, something old and quiet and sharp. No one had ever said that before. Beauty was not a word in the hollow, only function, only power. Then, as if it were nothing, he offered me a stick of dried fruit from his pocket. "You can have this. It's my favorite." I took it. I did not eat it. I only held it, and somehow it burned more deeply than flame. He left soon after, stumbling back toward the edge of the trees. I followed from above, silent. He turned once, just before his village lights returned. "Thank you, Shadow Man," he said. I never learned his name. But I remembered his voice. I returned to the forest many times. I watched the humans live. I saw death, too. Quiet and slow. No flames. No ritual. Only finality. They mourned it, then moved on. There was something powerful in that. One evening, I crept closer to a town. Not just a village, but a place with walls and bells and written things nailed to doors. I listened to their stories told around fire. They spoke of demons, monsters, us. Tamil, they said, was a name of destruction. I flinched. They said my name like a curse. I wondered how it had reached them. Perhaps long ago, one like me came and did not listen. Perhaps I was already written into their memory as a nightmare. But one voice, older than the others, said something that stayed with me. They were not always evil, the elder woman said, her face lit by a candle's flicker. Some were broken, some were lost, and some simply never knew anything else. She looked into the flame. But even a demon can dream of peace, can't it? No one answered, but I did, silently, from the roof above her. Yes. The next night, the sigil ached deeply. I had grown too far from the hollow's center. My thoughts no longer burned, they flickered, wavered. The dreams returned, not of fire, but of both fire and water, of mirrors and skies and stairs. I felt a pull, backward, a call. The rift opened again, not with chains this time, but with memory, a familiar smell, the sting of ash, the taste of blood. I stood at its edge, looking back once at the forest. I left the dried fruit on a stone by the river, a thank you, and then I stepped through, back into flame, back into the hollow, but not unchanged. The hollow had not changed, but I had. I felt it in every echo, in the way the fire coiled back from me, the way the stone beneath my feet no longer sang the same note when I walked. The air here was thicker, sharper. My body obeyed its rules, but my thoughts, they walked elsewhere. I remembered the forest, the child's gaze, the warmth of music not tied to power. And the hollow, sensing this, recoiled. The rift closed behind me like a breath exhaled through clenched teeth. I stood again in the spire core, where the circle first marked me. But I was not greeted. No elders waited, only silence, and a single burning line carved into the obsidian floor. A command. Follow it. I did. The line led me down through stone that shimmered faintly with heat long trapped, through tunnels I had never seen, where the walls pulsed with old sigils and sleeping things moved just beyond the edge of light. I descended for a day, or a century, time bent strangely here, like it had in the rift. Eventually, the path ended in a chamber vast and circular, lit from within by a suspended orb of cold flame that turned slowly, casting no shadows. Waiting in its center was a figure, not a demon. A shape carved from stone and bone, bearing 7 faces and none. Its voice was every tone I had ever heard layered together. You have seen the edge, it said. I did not nod. I only stepped forward. You bring it with you. It was not a question. The sigil in my chest responded before I could speak. A beam of light broke from it, touching the orb above. For the first time in memory, I heard the hollow groan, not in pain, but in memory, as if something very old had just woken up. The being extended a limb, a knot hand wrapped in rings that pulsed with script, and laid it over my head. You are no longer bound. You are being rewritten. I opened my mouth to ask what that meant, but it spoke again. You are becoming a key. The orb darkened. The walls around us shivered, runes flashing faster than thought. The hollow burns inward, it said. But not all flames serve destruction. Some open doors. I was cast from the chamber before I could ask more. Thrown not by force, but by the unraveling of presence. I blinked and found myself back among the spiral path, where acolytes and initiates walked in ritual circles to burn away hesitation. They saw me and turned aside. Not out of fear, out of instinct. They did not know what I had become, but they knew I was not like them anymore. The circle summoned me again days later. This time, their eyes lingered longer behind their masks. The eldest among them removed his veil, revealing not a face, but a mirror of obsidian. I saw myself in it, not as I was, but as I had been, a child of ash and fire, innocent in the hollow's way, unquestioning. You have touched the outside, he said. We feel its tremors. I didn't deny it. You have walked where demons should not walk. You have changed. Still I said nothing. He raised a hand. Then so must we. That day, I was given no order, only freedom. They could not command me anymore. The sigil marked me as beyond them, and yet, I was still theirs. Bound not by force, but by memory. I had been born in the hollow. My first screams were made of flame. That did not vanish. So I wandered. Not in rebellion, but in curiosity. I sought places forgotten, burial tombs where ancient demons whispered from beneath molten stone, libraries sealed with silence where thoughts could kill if read without the right eyes. I began to write on walls, on bones, even in flame itself. Not commands, not spells, thoughts, ideas, dreams. Other demons began to follow. Not many, only those who had grown tired of endless trial, of the circular suffering that passed for purpose. We did not form a rebellion. We were too few. We had no banners, only echoes. I taught one to listen to the stone, another to speak in light, a third I sent through a rift. He returned silent, but changed. He began to draw circles that sang. The hollow noticed, and it began to resist. Walls closed where they had once opened. Runes cracked. Fires grew unstable. The elders watched us with increasing wariness. Some whispered that we were a disease, that Tamil carried a rot in his chest. Perhaps they were right, but it was a rot born of vision. A year passed, or something like it. Time in the hollow was always strange. I grew. My wings healed fully, sharper and more elegant than they had ever been. I wore no armor, only marks I carved into my own skin. Symbols of paths I had walked, names I had dreamed. I no longer needed to hide the fire. It curled around me always, quiet and thoughtful, like a memory with teeth. One night, beneath the ash crown, the peak of the hollow's highest cavern, where the old kings were turned to ash and scattered, I saw something change. The stone cracked. Light spilled through. Not magma light. Skylight. Impossible. The hollow did not have a sky. I climbed, faster than I should have. Up through stone that burned and shifted and tried to close behind me. The others followed, some silent, some shouting my name. When I reached the crack, I looked through and saw the sky again. Blue, alive, calling, but also not empty. A shape moved across it. A vast winged thing, neither angel nor beast. Something old, something forgotten. It looked down and saw me. It did not kill me. It bowed, and then it flew on. That night, I slept not with fear, but with knowing. The hollow was not the only world, and we were not its prisoners. The ash crown never mended. The crack remained like a wound across the ceiling of the hollow, bleeding sky into a world that had never known it. The elders tried to seal it, first with flame, then with song, then with silence, but nothing held. The light kept seeping through, and with it came dreams. Demons, even the oldest, began to speak of strange visions. Wings of color, trees that whispered, oceans with no bottom. For a realm made of fire and certainty, it was a dangerous thing. Possibility. I watched as fear took root, not fear of destruction, but fear of change. And fear made them cruel. The circles summoned me again, though now they did not call it summoning. Parley, they said. To listen, not command. But I knew what this truly was, a test of containment. Could they shape me back into what I was, or would I continue to stretch into something they no longer understood? You are tearing the hollow apart, one elder hissed. Your path unweaves the pattern. The pattern is a cage, I said softly. You know this. It is a fire that keeps us alive. No. It is a fire that keeps us the same. A long silence followed. Then, the one called Myradax, the only elder who had ever once walked the outer gate before it closed forever, spoke. What do you see, Tamil? I turned toward him. His eyes glowed like the center of a black sun. I see a path forward. No one has ever walked forward, he said. Only down. Then maybe it's time someone climbs. He didn't argue. He only looked tired. Beneath the obsidian of his skin, his bones had begun to crack. Time frayed even the oldest of us, and he had seen too much. Perhaps in another time, he might have followed me. But not now. I was exiled that day. Not by chains, by silence. A decree carved into the roots of the hollow that none would speak my name aloud again. Not as praise, not as curse. I was not banished physically. I could walk where I pleased. But no one would acknowledge me, not unless they wanted to share my fate. They called it the Shroud Sentence, and I wore it with pride. I returned to the fracture, the place where the ash crown had split, and made my dwelling there. Not a throne, not a temple, just space. Space for thought, for growth, for waiting. The others came in secret. First the dreamers, then the broken, then the curious. Each brought something of the hollow with them, and left with something of the world beyond. I taught what I had learned, how to burn without destruction, how to speak with light, how to listen with the bones. I gave them no name, no banner. We were not a rebellion. Rebellion implies we wanted their thrones. We didn't. We wanted to walk forward, together. But the hollow would not allow that forever. One night, the rift opened again, not by our hands, but by theirs. The circle. They ripped it wide and dragged something through. Not a demon, not a human, an angel. It was broken, half-formed, wrapped in chains of sulfur and prayer. Its wings were scorched, but its eyes still glowed with clarity. They hung it in the pit of echoes, deep beneath the hollow, and fed it pain until it sang. Not a song of joy, a song of despair. They wanted to study it, to learn how it had crossed the veil, to learn how to stop it from ever happening again. But in their hunger, they made a mistake. They made it resonate. And that resonance called to me. I heard its cry not in sound, but in flame. The sigil in my chest pulsed, and I felt myself pulled downward, not by gravity, but by kinship. Not that I was angel, but that we were both outside now. So I went to it. I broke the seals not with force, but with memory. I whispered to the walls in the old tongue, and they opened. I passed through wards made of bone and sorrow, and they cracked at my breath. I descended into the pit. It saw me, and I saw it. It was not beautiful, nor was it terrifying. It simply was. A being shaped by balance, shattered now, held together by pain and conviction. One wing missing, one eye closed, but it was still awake, still watching. I reached out, and it did not flinch. "Why did you fall?" I asked. It didn't speak, but the answer was in its light. To reach us, to reach me. I shattered its chains, not to save it, to free it. It did not fly. It did not thank me. It simply rose, bent its neck toward me in something like acknowledgement, and vanished in a column of blue flame. Upward, toward the crack in the sky. That night, the hollow howled. Not with rage, with fear. And I understood. This was the first fracture, not in stone, in order, in what we were meant to be. I stood alone in the pit as the flames rose higher and the walls began to shake. And I smiled. After the angel vanished, the hollow did not sleep. Its skin trembled with old instincts, contraction, retaliation, survival. The elders sealed themselves in the 13 vaults, calling on ancient pacts to hold the realm together. The lower halls burned unchecked. Stone turned to ash and ash to silence. Runes blinked out of sequence. Songs of binding faltered. Even the beasts, those molten things bred in the underfurnaces for war, began to stir in confused alarm. But they were not angry, only uncertain. Something was ending, or beginning, and the hollow had no language for beginning. I returned to the fracture. My followers, if they could be called that, stood waiting, their bodies marked by dreams, their wings bent but strong. We watched the ash fall like snow, soft and slow. And we did not speak. There was nothing to explain. They had felt the shift too. We were beyond declarations, beyond rebellion. The hollow would come for us now. It was only a matter of how. That night, I sat alone beneath the crack in the sky and called the fire. Not as a weapon, as a listener. And for the first time, it heard me. The flames did not roar. They curled inward, then outward, forming symbols I had never been taught. Images, stories, fire as language, not destruction, not binding, expression. I watched it unfold for hours, visions of stars I'd never seen, of creatures without shape, of harmony between realms once divided. I saw myself. Tamil not as a weapon, but as a bridge, a flame that illuminated rather than consumed. The fire whispered a name I did not know, but it echoed within the sigil burned in my chest. A name not of the hollow, a name from before, or after. I couldn't be sure. I repeated it aloud. The stone around me cracked with resonance, and the fire listened again. From that moment on, I was no longer alone in my mind. The fire stayed with me, quietly, not as a voice or command, as presence, as witness. I understood now why the angel had come. Not to destroy us, not even to convert us, but to awaken us to the idea that fire could be more than pain, more than control, that even a world built on ash could remember the warmth it once had before it forgot itself. But the circle could not allow this. They came not with words, but with the black choir, a choir of silence and song, forged from the first screams of the first flame. They surrounded the fracture in rings, their mouths open, not singing, but unmaking. The sound was not a sound. It was the absence of self. Demons who heard it too long forgot their names, their memories, their shapes. It was a weapon against meaning. I stood before them, wings spread, and I did not fight. I spoke. Only a single word. The name the fire had whispered. And the choir broke. Not shattered. They remembered. The song faltered. Some collapsed, clutching at symbols they no longer understood. Others dropped their masks and wept molten tears. One walked forward and fell to his knees before me. "What have you done?" he asked, voice thick with fear and awe. I took his hand. I listened. The flames around the fracture bloomed upward, not in rage, but in invitation. Light danced across the ruined walls. My followers stepped from the shadows, not armored, but bare. The sigils they bore pulsed with their own meanings. Not assigned, chosen. And the hollow watched. It did not attack. It did not retreat. It waited. Somewhere deep in the forge root, I felt the heart of the realm beat slower, steadier. Not in surrender, in consideration. We had done something irreversible. We had changed the hollow's rhythm. In the days that followed, more demons arrived. Some wounded, some afraid, but all curious. I welcomed them. I gave them no names, no ranks, only questions. What did they dream of? What did they remember? What did they want? And slowly, the hollow began to dream too. The stone stopped shifting. The fire stopped lashing. The old sigils pulsed not with warnings, but with inquiry. The realm did not die. It shifted. I no longer needed the fracture. The crack in the sky had become a window, and through it I saw not the old world I had visited, but new worlds forming. Born from us, not in spite of our nature, because of it. That was the lesson. Fire does not only destroy, it transforms. The hollow had gone quiet, not the silence of dread, but of something deeper, like breath held before a first note. I walked the spiral paths alone that week, watching as old symbols began to shift. Not fade, but reshape. The walls no longer hummed with threat. They pulsed with curiosity. Even the lowest tunnels, where once flame devoured memory, now simply glowed with a gentle light, almost shy. I wondered if the hollow had always known this shape was possible but had forgotten how to reach it. Those who followed me no longer needed to hide. They moved freely, though not always safely. Some of the elder demons still whispered that I had cracked something sacred, that the hollow was unraveling. But others began to listen. Slowly, quietly. The shroud sentence still lingered. We were not spoken of aloud, but more and more eyes turned toward the fracture, and not with hatred. One morning, beneath the black root where the hollow's first tower had collapsed eons ago, I felt a tremor. Not physical, deeper, an unspoken pulse in the bones. I traced it to a forgotten vault sealed in 7 rings of silence. It had no name, only a symbol etched into the air, a bell broken through its center. I stepped inside. The chamber was not dark, but dim. The kind of dim that asks you to feel rather than see. In the center stood the bell, massive, cracked, untouched by flame. It was made of something older than stone, older than language. I didn't know how I knew that, only that the sigil in my chest responded to it with warmth. The bell did not ring when I touched it. It breathed. Images spilled from its surface like ripples, memories, echoes, dreams. A time before the hollow. Or perhaps a future folded backward into the past. I saw beings without form dancing through light. I saw fire given freely, not as punishment, but as a gift. I saw demons and angels and things without names sharing a single silence, not of fear, but of respect. And at the center of it all, a name unspoken. Not mine, not the hollow's, but something between. The bell did not tell me what to do. It waited. So I Saturday. I closed my eyes. And I listened. For 3 days, I neither moved nor spoke. I let the soundless resonance shape me. Not change me, but remind me of what had always been buried beneath my skin. When I finally stood, I was no brighter, no stronger, no taller. But the fire within me had changed. It no longer flared on instinct. It asked. Outside the vault, the world had shifted. My followers greeted me differently, not with awe, but with stillness. They had felt it too. The bell had not rung, but its presence had reshaped the silence. And with it came a new understanding. Not all power needs to speak. Some waits until it's needed, then whispers. That night, the hollow sent its last message. A single envoy, wrapped in robes made of ashen bone, approached the fracture unarmed. Her name was Sail, and she had once been the keeper of the 9th furnace, one of the hollow's executioners. She knelt before me, not in submission, but in recognition. I was taught to burn what could not conform, she said. But you made the fire listen. I said nothing. She drew a blade made of hardened memory, shattered it at her feet, and walked away. Not back toward the circle. Out. Toward the ash crown. Others followed her. Some stayed. Some didn't. None of them asked for leadership. Only space. And so the hollow changed again. Not by command. By presence. We began to build not towers or temples, but places of quiet thought. Chambers made of cooled obsidian and mossy stone where flame was invited, not chained. In one, we placed a bowl of memory. In another, a pool of reflected silence. Each held an echo of the bell. The fire danced across them, curious. And in that dance, we began to dream not just of change, but of what came next. We had always thought the hollow was the end. That fire devoured all and left only ash. But what if ash was not death? What if ash was soil? And something could grow. Beneath the ash crown, in a valley that had once been nothing but charred stone and forgotten bones, something impossible began to grow. At first it was a single sprout, frail, grey, pulsing faintly with heat. Not flame, not shadow. Something gentler. Something alive. We watched it for days, uncertain. Demons are not creatures of bloom. But this thing, this strange flicker of becoming, refused to die. It reached toward the cracked sky like it had always belonged. No one had planted it. Not in the way we understood. But the bell had breathed. And perhaps the hollow had listened. More followed. Stalks of red glass grass. Coiled vines with eyes that never blinked. Stones that hummed and shed warmth. The ash did not resist them. It cradled their roots like an old guardian finally at peace with letting something new be born. Soon, the valley was not just a wound, but a cradle. We named it Turnvalos, the breathing place. And there, something changed in us. I felt it first in the way my flame moved not just outward, but inward, mapping the chambers of my being I had long since ignored. Regret, yes, but also joy and wonder. My wings no longer cast just shadows. They shimmered, faintly, in light that wasn't light. I felt no need to rise, no hunger to command. Just the pull of presence, like the bell, like the fire when it first listened. Others began to transform too, subtly, not shedding what they were, but letting go of what they had been forced to become. Horns twisted in patterns that matched the vines. Eyes blinked in new rhythms. One demon grew roots from her feet, anchoring herself during sleep. Another wept molten tears that sang when they touched the soil. We did not call these changes blessings. They simply were, and none of us questioned them. Still, the hollow watched. The circle no longer sent hunters. They had gone quiet, and in that quiet, we sensed something deeper than anger. Uncertainty. They had built their power on permanence. Their towers were thick with stone that refused to erode, their rituals carved in scars that refused to fade. But now, even the stones were asking questions. And questions are dangerous things to those who rule by silence. One night, I walked alone to the center of Turnvalos and sat beside the oldest sprout. It had grown into a silver-barked tree, thin but strong, leaves curling inward like thoughts in mid-formation. I placed my hand on its trunk, and it opened a memory. Not mine. The hollow's. I saw the time before fire. A place of stillness, where demons were not yet named, only felt. Beings of pure motion, without skin or weight. The first flame was not born in war. It was born in need, the need to know the self. And with that knowing came form. Form brought friction. Friction brought fire. And from fire, the hollow. It had not always been cruel. It had been confused. Its children screamed not out of rage, but out of fear at being separate. The circle had formed not to conquer, but to keep the pain contained. And somewhere in the endless repetition of punishment and doctrine, they had forgotten that the hollow was never meant to be a prison, only a passage. We were never its end. We were always its beginning. When I awoke from the memory, the sigil in my chest had changed. Where once it pulsed with one color, deep ember, it now shimmered with many, like oil across fire. I was still Tamiel. But I was also more. I was becoming. That night, the stars moved. Real stars. Through the fracture. For the first time, I saw the sky not as a wound but as a window. And what I saw beyond made my flame flicker with awe. Not heaven. Not earth. Something else. A place where flame and form and song were one. Where silence was not empty. Where fire grew gardens. Where demons did not burn. They glowed. The fire beside me whispered, "You are not finished." I nodded. I had never wanted to rule, only to understand. But now I saw that understanding was not stillness. It was a path. And the path still called. The world was no longer what I had known. The hollow had shifted, and so had I. I walked among the glowing vines of Turnvalos, feeling the pulse of every root and leaf beneath my feet, the fire within me no longer a wild blaze but a steady, knowing warmth. The sigil in my chest shimmered like a constellation, never fixed, always evolving. My followers, no longer shadows of former selves, gathered around me not as servants or soldiers, but as seekers. Their eyes held light, and their voices carried the weight of stories newly remembered. Together, we sat beneath the silver tree, the bells echo humming faintly in the air. We spoke of what had been and what might be, of fire that listens, of ash that cradles, of silence that sings. And we dreamed. For the first time, we dreamed beyond survival, beyond rebellion, beyond the endless cycle of flame and ruin. The fracture widened not to swallow, but to open. Through it, I glimpsed the vastness beyond the hollow, a world not of division but of connection, where flame and shadow were threads in the same tapestry. The bell's silent call echoed within me. It was time to cross, not as conquerors, but as bridges. I stood and spread my wings, no longer dark and broken, but radiant with many colors, the hues of ash, ember, and dawn. Behind me, my followers rose, their flames steady and their hearts open. Together, we stepped through the crack. And the world held its breath. What waited beyond was unknown, new realms, new stories, new fires to kindle. But I no longer feared the unknown, for I had learned that fire does not consume without purpose. It transforms, it awakens, it becomes. And so, beneath the silent bell, in the garden born of ash, I, the demon once bound by rage and shadow, became something else. A flame that listens, a light that carries, a bridge between what was and what could be. The journey was only beginning. But for now, it was enough. Thank you for listening to this light story. If you enjoyed this lovely tale, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Light Story Club will be here for when you want to listen to another chronicle to help you rest. Goodbye for now.